The sunscreen aisle at your regular drugstore hasn't actually changed in 15 years. Same bottles, same orange and yellow packaging, same coconut smell that takes you straight back to a beach towel from 1994. You reach for the one that smells like your childhood, or the one your derm mentioned once, or the one that was on sale, and you feel good about it. Responsible even. You did the grown-up thing today. I need you to sit with something before we go any further. Several of the bottles you feel good about right now are at this exact moment sitting inside an active lawsuit. Not someone online said, filed in court this year. And I'm saving the most surprising name on this whole list for the very end because it's not a scrappy little startup. It's not a brand you've never heard of. It's the one your dermatologist has been telling you to buy for 20 years. That one's coming last. And I promise you, it's worth the wait. Here's the one thing I want you to carry through everything I'm about to tell you. The SPF number on the front of a bottle is a promise. It is not a guarantee. Nobody polices it in real time. A company writes 50 on the label, and unless someone, a regulator, a plaintiff's lawyer, an independent lab with a grudge, actually goes and tests it, that 50 just sits there, unquestioned, for years. In my world, in Korean skincare, we've never treated the SPF number as the interesting part of a sunscreen. It's the least interesting part. It's table stakes. What tells you whether a company respects your skin is everything around that number, the texture, the transparency about what filters they're actually using, and whether they still stand behind the label when somebody checks their homework. And this year, more companies than I've seen in a long time have failed that check. So today, 8 brands sitting in my stop restocking without thinking pile, and 4 I genuinely put in my own bag this summer. 8 and 4. Let's go! Number 8. Hawaiian Tropic and Banana Boat, both owned by the same company, Edgewell. For years, they marketed themselves with a little coral reef logo and the words reef-friendly because the formulas didn't contain oxybenzone or octinoxate. The 2 filters most people have heard are bad for coral. Clever, right? Except Australia's consumer watchdog looked closer and is now taking Edgewell to federal court, alleging those same reef-friendly sunscreens actually contained other filters, octocrylene, homosalate, avobenzone among them, that the regulator says pose their own risk to reef life. That's still working through the courts, so treat it as an allegation, not a verdict. But separately and more concretely, a 2025 class action in Connecticut alleges an independent lab tested Hawaiian Tropics Everyday Active SPF 50 Sport Lotion and got a real-world result of SPF 20, less than half of what's on the bottle. If you want the honest version of what these two are trying to be, look at Vanicream instead, a small family-run Minnesota company that's been making unglamorous mineral dermatologist-recommended sunscreen since the 1970s. It won't smell like a vacation. It will do what it says. Number 7. Sunbum. I love how this brand is styled. The beachy ape mascot. The "we're not a big corporation" energy. Sunbum has been owned by SC Johnson since 2019. Yes, the Raid, Glade, and Windex company. That alone isn't a scandal. Conglomerates own indie-feeling brands constantly. What is a problem? In May of 2025, the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office settled false advertising charges against Sunbum for marketing its sunscreens as reef-friendly while they contained oxybenzone and octinoxate. The company was ordered to drop the claim entirely and pay into reef restoration. And separately, 2 different class actions filed later that year allege independent testing found one of Sunbum's SPF 50 mineral lotions actually performing at SPF 17, and that several of its 100% mineral products quietly include synthetic, non-mineral ingredients. If you want that same breezy, easygoing texture without the asterisks, Elta MD is the swap dermatologists have been making for years. Pricier, yes, and you'll mostly find it online or at the derm's office rather than on a beach towel display. But nobody's had to settle a case over its number. Number 6. And hold on to this thread because it pays off. Hula, the brand that built its whole identity on being the clean, eco-conscious, farm-to-face alternative to big sunscreen. Hula is also owned by SC Johnson, same parent as the brand I just told you about. Two sunscreens marketed as complete opposites. One beachy and mass, one elegant and clean girl, quietly reporting up to the same household chemicals company. That's not an accusation of wrongdoing on Kula's part specifically. It's just the thing I want you to notice. Two labels selling you two different stories, one owner cashing both checks. If eco-conscious marketing is what drew you in, Round Lab's Birch Juice Sunscreen actually earns that reputation the hard way, which we'll get to. Number 5. Copper Tone, the original. The one that basically invented this category in 1944. Owned since 2019 by Beiersdorf, the German company behind Nivea and Eucerin, which isn't a red flag on its own. European ownership of an American sun care icon is honestly a fairly sane arrangement. What earns Coppertone a spot here? In 2021, it voluntarily recalled a dozen lots of 5 different aerosol spray products after finding benzene, a substance the FDA classifies as a human carcinogen, in the affected cans. To be fair to them, the company and the FDA both said daily exposure at the levels detected wasn't expected to cause harm, and the recall was completed. But related consumer lawsuits followed, and in 2023, Coppertone settled one of those cases for $2.3 million. If the appeal of Coppertone was ever, "This is what my mother used, it must be fine," Beauty of Joseon's Rice and Probiotic Sunscreen has quietly become the modern version of that same trust. Simple ingredient list, transparent filters, and a formula young enough that nobody's had 30 years to find something wrong with it yet. Number 4. Neutrogena. Right now, Neutrogena's parent company, Kenvue, the health and beauty business Johnson & Johnson spun off in 2023, is itself in the middle of being acquired by Kimberly-Clark, the Kleenex and Huggies company, in a deal worth nearly $50 billion that's expected to close later this year. Ownership in flux is never the moment a brand is investing hardest in quiet, unglamorous formula work. And Neutrogena has its own unresolved thread. A 2021 class action alleging the company failed to warn consumers about benzene levels in specific sunscreen sprays. J&J agreed to settle for under $2 million in 2023. An appeals court sent that deal back for a second look in 2024, and the case is technically still open. Think about that for a second. A brand mid-acquisition, mid-lawsuit, asking you to trust the same formula on faith. Elta MD, again, is where a lot of the dermatologists who used to reach for Neutrogena have already moved. Number 3. Clinique. This one surprised even me. In December of 2025, a new class action alleged that Clinique's broad-spectrum SPF 50 mineral sunscreen fluid for face, a prestige department counter product, was independently tested and came back at SPF 26. Half of what's promised at a price point that assumes you're paying for precision. Vamicream, again at a fraction of the price, has never had to explain a number like that to anyone. Number 2. Supergoop. Of everyone on this list, Supergoop built the most complete brand mythology. Sun protection as self-care, as a founder's mission after a friend's cancer diagnosis, as something worth paying prestige prices for. In 2021, Blackstone, yes, one of the largest private equity firms on earth, the same investors behind Spanx, bought a majority stake in Supergoop for somewhere between $600 and $700 million. And in 2025, the Santa Clara County District Attorney reached a settlement with Supergoop over the same kind of reef-friendly and environmentally friendly claims we've already talked about twice tonight. Supergoop was barred from making those claims going forward. The theater was beautiful. The formula still had to answer to a courtroom. Round Lab's sunscreen, again, gives you that same weightless, no white cast finish without asking you to believe a founder's mission story to justify the price. And number one, the one I teased at the start, La Roche-Posay, owned by L'Oreal since the late 1980s, recommended by more dermatologists than perhaps any sunscreen brand on the planet. The gold standard people reach for specifically because it feels like the safe, boring, medically endorsed choice. In August of 2025, a class action was filed in California, alleging that independent lab testing, using the FDA's own required method, found La Roche-Posay's Enthelios Melt-in Milk sunscreen, labeled SPF 60, actually delivering SPF 34, not a rounding error, nearly half. This is still an allegation working through the courts, and L'Oreal hasn't been found liable of anything as I'm recording this. But sit with the irony. The brand built entirely on being the trustworthy, unexciting dermatologist choice option is the one now being asked in a courtroom to explain its own number. Beauty of Josian's Rice sunscreen won't hand you a French pharmacy logo. It will hand you a formula that, so far, nobody's had to litigate. Protection was never a number. It was a habit. Say that with me, because it's the thing that gets you through everything I'm about to tell you next. Here are the four I'd actually buy. Vanicream. Not glamorous. A thick, unscented mineral formula from a small pharmacist-founded company in Rochester, Minnesota, that's been quietly doing this since the 1970s, wearing the National Eczema Association seal on its facial version. The honest limitation: mineral-only formulas can sit heavier and leave more of a cast than a modern chemical filter blend. If you want elegance, this isn't it. If you want a formula nobody's had to explain in front of a judge, this is it. Elta MD. The brand dermatologists actually reach for once they've stopped recommending the department store names. Owned by Colgate-Palmolive since 2017. Which means, yes, the same company behind your toothpaste is behind your sunscreen. And I want you to notice that rather than pretend it isn't true. The honest limitation: it's pricier, and you'll find it more often through a dermatology office or online than on a Target shelf. Beauty of Joseon's Relief. Sun, rice, and probiotics. This is the one that made Korean sunscreen a global conversation, and it earned that the hard way. During the 2020 and 2021 controversy, where several Korean brands were caught having their SPF numbers overstated by shared manufacturing labs, Beauty of Joseon wasn't among the ones dragged through it. It's owned by a company called Gudai Global, which also owns the next brand on this list. So even in my recommend pile, don't assume separate names means separate ownership. That's not a red flag. It's just today's beauty industry. Everywhere, including in Korea. And the one I promised you. Round Lab's Birch Juice Moisturizing Sunscreen. Here's the part of the story that makes this one different from everything else tonight. Its original manufacturer was one of the labs implicated in that 2020 Korean SPF scandal. The formula was pulled from the market entirely. Refunds issued, reputation in tatters. Round Lab didn't quietly rebrand and hope you'd forget. It reformulated, sent the new version out for independent lab verification, and came back with a sunscreen that's now one of the most trusted exports in K-beauty. Weightless, no white cast, verified rather than merely claimed. That's the whole difference between everything I told you to avoid tonight and everything I just told you to buy. Not trust me. Prove it. Then let me trust you. A few honest things before you go shopping. What's on shelves rotates by season and by country, so treat this as a map of what to look for. Company ownership, whether a brand's numbers have been independently checked. How transparent the ingredient list is. Not a guaranteed shopping list you can screenshot and take to the store forever. Patch test anything new, especially chemical filters, on the inside of your wrist before your whole face. And please don't let anything I've said tonight talk you out of wearing sunscreen. Every single brand I mentioned still blocks real, meaningful UV radiation. The lawsuits are about the gap between the label and the lab result, not about whether sunscreen works. An SPF 34, you actually reapply, beats an SPF 60 you trust blindly and only put on once. Which brings me to the one technique I want you to take out of this video. Pat, don't rub. Especially with a mineral formula, rubbing drags the filter into streaks and thins it out right where you need it most, exactly the way over-massaging a rice powder finish ruins it. And apply it last, after your other skincare has had a minute to settle. The same thin to thick logic we use for the rest of a Korean routine. The formula only works if it's actually sitting on your skin, not half absorbed into last night's serum. Here's the bigger thing I want you to leave with, because it's actually good news. On June 9th of this year, the FDA approved Bemotrizanol, sold as Parcel Shield, as a new sunscreen active ingredient. That is the first new filter approved in the United States in 27 years, not since 1999. It's been safely used in Europe and Asia the entire time, and companies can start putting it into American sunscreens starting this August. So the real story here was never really that a household cleaning company owns your sunscreen, or that a private equity firm bought a founder's mission. Conglomerate ownership was never the villain. A regulatory system that had been frozen since before some of you had children was the villain. And cracks are finally showing in it, right as we're sitting here. Watch for that ingredient name on labels this fall. It's worth being the first person at your pharmacy who knows what it means. Protection was never a number. It was a habit. Keep the habit. Question the number. And let the company earn your trust the way Round Lab had to earn it back. Tell me in the comments which of these 8 you've been quietly restocking without a second thought, and which of the 4 you're actually adding to your cart this week. And if this is the kind of thing you want more of, the label reading, the ownership charts nobody shows you. Subscribe. That's the whole promise of this channel, taking the theater off the shelf so you can see the formula underneath. Next time, I want to talk about what happens when that new American filter actually hits shelves this fall and whether it's worth switching for. See you then!